Hey there. In this video, we're going to talk about mastering grammar and sentence structures in the integrated learning system. This is the step-by-step guide. Step number 5, you're going to use your text and audio to understand how the grammar works so that you can speak better, so that you speak correctly and you become a more proficient English speaker. So that's what we're going to cover in this video. Now, let me start out by saying that even though we're talking about grammar, I want you to understand that we're going to be talking about how the grammar is used in the context of the text that you're studying. I know a lot of people get caught up about the grammar. Some people don't like to study grammar at all and think it's useless and unnecessary. That's not true. Grammar is simply the way we join the words and create phrases. So if you want to know how to join words in English and you want to know how to form sentences, then you need to understand the grammar. However, there are people who want to study grammar and lots of grammar, and they feel that by studying the grammar rules, they will be better language speakers. If they can memorize all the rules, they will speak perfectly. And that's not necessarily true. Two things. One, remember we talked about people who learn to ride their bicycles and play the guitar in the very beginning of this series. Remember? Remember that you don't learn how to ride a bicycle or how to play the guitar by reading a book. Just because you read a book about the guitar doesn't mean you are a good player. You have to take the guitar and practice. To ride a bicycle, you have to go outside and get on the bicycle and practice. So it's the same thing with learning grammar. You have to get out there and practice and use it. And when you have doubts, you can refer to the grammar or ask how it works. So what's really neat about the integrated learning system is that you're going to learn grammar within the context of the text that you're studying and the audio that you're listening to. When you were a child, how did you learn to speak your mother tongue? Did you study grammar first and then learn how to speak? No. You learned to speak. You listened to other people. You talked with your mother and with your father, and they corrected your mistakes, and you learned to speak. After you learned how to speak, then you went to school and you studied the grammar so you could improve your speaking and speak better, right? There are many things you know how to say in your mother tongue, but you don't necessarily remember all the grammar rules. So I want you to keep that in mind as we're talking about mastering the grammar here within the context of the integrated learning system. Remember that grammar is just simply the way we join words and create phrases, okay? And I know this is hard for a lot of students because they feel frustrated when they don't know how to speak. They don't know how to join words and form sentences. They don't know how to put those words together correctly. And oftentimes the word order may be different from your mother tongue. So as you listen to the audio, you're going to learn how those words are used in the correct order. And you can look at the text and see how those words are joined, how sentences are formed. We talked about this a little bit in the previous step with learning new expressions, how those phrases are formed. And that also involves a little bit of this aspect of the grammar. Because we're not talking about the meta language of grammar. We're not talking about how prepositions are used and all that kind of stuff. We're just simply observing how words are joined, how those words are structured, how sentences are formed so that you can communicate your ideas. All right? So if you do that while you're reading and listening to the text, you can highlight any grammar points that you find interesting. Just like you did with the vocabulary and expressions, you're going to see sentence structures that you find interesting. Some that you may not understand at all. Others that you may kind of have seen but you're not real familiar with them. And others that you see and kind of understand but they seem different and a little bit off. Just like vocabulary, you're going to see grammar points. And I'm going to show you some examples from my own French learning. So here are some things that you may want to know how to do in English. You may want to know how to ask questions. This is something people ask me a lot. David, how can I ask questions in English? How do I form the questions? Or you may want to know how to use prepositions. For example, like in, on, and at, that can be confusing to someone who is learning English. For English speakers, they seem normal and natural. But when you're translating from your mother tongue to English, they may have different translations or different uses, or you may have, for example, one preposition in Portuguese that is translated different ways, or you may have several prepositions in English that have the same meaning as one in Portuguese, and they can get really confusing. I'm even confused trying to explain this, all right? But when you understand that you don't have to memorize how those prepositions are used, you just learn how they're used in the sentence, how those sentences are formed, where they're used, when they're used, and you begin to observe them, then you can go look them up to understand how they work the way they do. Because if you just try to learn some rules in an abstract way, and you don't really understand how they work in a practical way, it won't do you much good. So if you want to know what words join phrases, for example, like conjunctions, remember? I mentioned previously where you take short phrases and learn to join them, like Mauri mentioned in his video on 3 tips for speaking better English. So basically what he had to do was learn how to use conjunctions like and but, or and nor. So once you realize, okay, I need to learn how to say this stuff in English, how does this work? How do these words work? How are these words joined together? What are these sentences saying? You observe them and learn them, then you can use them when you want to begin producing the language by writing and speaking to express yourself. So let me show you an example from one of my French lessons. So you can see here one of the texts that I was studying with the integrated learning system. And at the time, I wanted to know how to ask questions in French. I was kind of confused about how to use why, when, what, where, etc. And so I noticed that in this text there were several questions. For example, why are you irritated? And why is your visage fallen? Or where is your brother Abel? Or what have you done? So I simply highlighted and made each of those questions bold and colored them red, so that way I could go back and study them later. So let's talk about verb tenses. This is another part of grammar learning that frustrates many students. So you can also highlight verb tenses while you are reading your text. As you read along or listen, pay attention to the words that express action or states of being. Pay attention to how they're used. How are those verbs conjugated? How does one verb differ from another to express time? As you look at these things and pay attention to how verbs are used, you will be able to better express your ideas in relation to time as well. So let me show you an example from one of my integrated lessons. You notice that there is this word, dwa, dwera, dwe, dwe, that I saw, and I realized that they must mean something similar. I figured this was a verb, but I wasn't sure exactly what it meant. So I simply highlighted each time I saw that particular formation. Later, when I went back to see what it meant, when I was guessing what it meant, I learned that it meant to kill. So I could see how this verb was used in the past and in the present, and even from different points of view. Now remember that at this point, you're not trying to learn what all these means and how they're conjugated. You're just simply reading your text and you're listening to the audio and observing how these things are used. When you see something and you have a question about it, simply highlight it or mark it somehow so you can come back and study it. So you can see here that I simply highlighted each of these words in gray. So you can actually do this while you're reading and listening to the article. And then once you're ready to come to this step and actually go and study it, you can look up what these different things mean, how these different parts of speech are used, and what the different grammar rules are for improving your speaking. So how do you do that? One, you can Google it. Just go research it, okay? Type in Google, how to conjugate the verb to kill in French. And a whole list of options will come up, sites that will show you. So as you research that and take notes and learn how these things function, you will be improving your grammar skills and you'll be able to speak clearly, more correctly, and proficiently, which is the goal. So it's not, remember I said it's not just learning things for the sake of learning in a theoretical way, but in a practical way when you need to use it. So you have a question, you see something interesting, you research it, figure out how it works, and then start to use it on your own. So look at an example here from my French lesson. You can see that I looked up a site that showed me how to conjugate the verb to kill. So as I started to analyze the different formations of the verbs, I didn't necessarily try to memorize it. I was just observing how the verbs are used with each of and to express different perspectives of time. So there are a few ideas of how you can master grammar structures while you're studying with the integrated learning system. Basically, you're going to learn what pops up, what you want to know, what you need to know, or things that stick out in the text and you find interesting so you can actually practice them and use them right away. Even in the steps that are coming up of writing and speaking, you will be able to communicate more proficiently. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was clarifying. If you have any questions or feedback, if something wasn't clear or we didn't cover something that you're facing right now in your English learning, please leave a comment. Let us know what that is so we can make and record future videos to explain these things and answer your questions. And that way we can continue this dialogue. And also feel free to share this video with your family and friends, people who want to learn English that you think it would be beneficial. I know they'll thank you and appreciate it, and we also appreciate you helping us to spread the word here. So thank you very much. Have a great day. And in the next video, we're going to talk about improving your pronunciation with the integrated learning system, as well as continue talking about how to develop your writing and speaking skills, and then go into the integrated learning system recipe. So we have all kinds of good things coming up. Stay tuned. See you later. Bye-bye.